You're listening to Crime Scene Today, where we discuss current and future issues in law enforcement, crime scene, and forensics. I'm your host, Dan Zentek. Thank you for listening to the podcast. We are currently listened to in 29 countries around the world. Well, today we have a unique experience. Normally we'll have one or two people on and talk about some of their expertise, but we actually have a specific topic we're talking about, and I found 3 subject matter experts to come on the show separately, and we've had some great conversations. And to sort of summarize, for one, the way this project came together is I'm currently extending my education at Louisiana State University, Shreveport, and my doctorate in leadership studies. It's an amazing program, and we're having a good time with it. And one of the projects we have is doing podcasts, which I was already doing before, so it certainly gives me an opportunity to reach out to just some amazing people and have some conversations related to some of the topics. This particular semester, we're talking about critical incidents and response. So I brought 3 people on the program. We're going to talk to them individually. The first one will be Joe Manz, who works for the Montgomery County Fire Marshal's Office, who is a bomb tech, runs an explosive dog, and has been part of the Fire Marshal's Office and arson investigation for many years. Currently, on the day that I interviewed Joe, he took a break from working Ironman, another huge event that's in the Woodlands, Texas, and talking about some of the preparation that goes into a major event like that. The second person we're going to talk to is Eddie Green, who works for the Harris County Fire Marshal's Office, but he has a unique job on the side. He manages the security for every Super Bowl for the past 20 years. We're going to talk about the preparedness of getting ready for a Super Bowl and the emergency response and all the things in place for that. The last person we have to listen to is just an amazing instructor, a wealth of knowledge in law enforcement. He has taught at the FBI National Academy. He is a program manager and has served in many roles for the Texas Police Chief Association and Accreditation Association for many Texas law enforcement agencies. Listening to him talk, you will just see his character, and one of the things that he will be speaking of is his interpretation, opinion of some leadership failures that have happened at Uvalde shooting at the elementary school, along with other leadership failures previously, and his opinion on what we need to do to fix some of those failures, or more importantly, where those failures lie. So Mike Gentry has done an amazing job, 40-plus years in law enforcement, and it's always amazing to hear him talk. So I hope you tune in and check out some of these amazing stories, amazing jobs that these people do. I'm so thankful that each of them had time to share their knowledge, and I'm so blessed and thankful to call each of them a friend. Joining me today, we have Joe Manz, who works as a bomb tech, runs an explosive dog, been with Fire Marshal's Office for many years, and one of the expertise that he has is looking at venues, looking at events, and doing preparation for events such as Super Bowl and Ironman and all the different things that you can think of that we have large crowds going to try to prepare for the unknown, for different critical incidents that may come up. So, Joe, thank you for joining us and to give us some insight on those type of preparations.
Absolutely, Dan. Happy to be with you.
So I know right now you're working Ironman, which is for those that don't know what Ironman is, and Joe, you probably can correct me. I think it's a 2-mile swim. Is it 110 or 115 miles on a bike, and then a full 26-mile marathon?
Yeah, it's a 2.4-mile swim, 112-mile bicycle ride, and a 26.2 marathon, a full-on run. And
you're participating in that, right? No?
Yeah, I feel like I have already. So our planning for this starts, 6 months out. I wasn't part of the planning group this year, but pretty much everything has stayed the same for the last several years. This is my 10th year to do Ironman here in the Woodland. The planning starts.
It's a long day when you go out there. I know that most officers are doing 18 to 24-hour shifts while it's going on. But again, as you said, the preparation comes months before. I mean, obviously, from year to year, you learn things and advance in things. I know that we've talked before with critical incidents and terrorist attacks and different things, that wherever there's a large amount of people, we have to be concerned with how we prepare and how we respond. And things such as the Boston Marathon and other events such as that, Super Bowl preparedness and parades where teams have won, and it's always the unknown. And so how do you even wrap your head around what you don't know?
Well, so a lot of it is we take the lessons learned from those attacks that have happened in the past, and we evaluate what's changed in our environment. Here in Montgomery County, we're growing so fast that things change from year to year. So we look at, where to fill in the holes, where to find the gaps, anything that would change as far as, just movement of people, mainly, being able to observe what's going on. Obviously, wherever your choke points are, your big spots like the finish line or the start line or the big transitions, here just for Ironman. And it goes the same for all of the events. The BOMTech community here is rather small, so we all chip in and help the other agencies for whatever, whether it's World Series, Super Bowl, Final Four, Houston Marathon, Woodlands Marathon, Ironman. There's so much that goes on, and the upper command staff has a pretty good grasp on it. The guys like me who are down here on the ground, we know the lay of the land for the most part. And so as like the event here for Ironman, as it starts getting later in the day, the pros are long gone. They've already finished. And I think the one pro finished in 7 hours, 40 something minutes. But come about 8 p.m., from about 8 p.m. to midnight, that's when the bulk of the contestants are going to be running. So you've got family members, you've got everybody, the spectators coming to see the race, as well as the vendors, everybody. There's a lot of moving parts going on down at the finish line. So we've got people, watching everything. We've got plainclothes folks. We've got people, in the office buildings looking down on the crowd. Anything that doesn't make sense, anything that looks suspicious, we try to keep all the cars moving. We've got officers down on the ground. We don't let people, park their car, get out, things like that. So, we've got, barricades, roads closed, things like that, just to try to keep that safe separation between, the roadway traffic and the large crowds.
Obviously, this is a multi-agency, many officers. I mean, there's 100+ officers that are working this event, just trying to make sure everyone remains safe and is watching everything.
Yeah, absolutely. We couldn't do it without our partner agencies, our neighboring agencies. We've got them from, probably 100 miles out. We've got officers from everywhere. When you look at things like just the road portion or the run portion of Ironman, we've got to close roads. We've also got roads that we can't close that share with the competitors on bicycle. So you've got officers out there stopping traffic to allow the bikes to go through, and then they let the cars go through as it's possible. So, yeah, we couldn't do this without our friends helping us.
Well, and so you talk about lessons learned, and obviously, sadly, those lessons come from tragedy, come from events where things were missed or holes weren't plugged, right? What are some
Exactly.
some things that I guess we've learned, or things that didn't work, leadership failures? What are some things from the past that have led us to where we are today?
Well, when we dissect the things like the Boston bombing, things like that, being able to bring in backpacks and things like that, um, we've got canines on the ground everywhere to try to mitigate that. We've got officers working pretty much everywhere around the crowded areas, observing who's bringing what, and if necessary, challenge them. Things like we've transitioned over into clear bags. When the contestants, uh, when they first arrive on location at the swim, they drop off their change of clothes because they're going to go from the water to a bicycle and then from a bicycle to a run. So each one of those requires a change of clothes. So, they put their clothes into their bag. It's numbered. It gets loaded on a truck before anything leaves the drop-off points. Everything is screened by a canine. And this year we had 3,200 people competing in Ironman this year. That's a lot. So that's a lot of people, a lot of canine work. And we've got Coast Guard here. We've got TSA here. We've got dogs from neighboring agencies here. So, we've got quite a few canines here. And then once things start to settle down, once the transitions are made and the last bicycle is off the road and everybody is on the run portion, then we focus our efforts on just watching the crowds, things like that. Who's doing what, where. And, with the canines, we're high profile. We are a visible presence at that point. And, everybody is looking for everything, and you'd be surprised, you'll have people that their family member is getting ready to run across the finish line and they want the perfect picture. Well, they'll drop their backpacks. They'll drop whatever that they were carrying with them. And now we have an unattended package that has to get scrutinized, things like that.
So what's the attendance there? They're estimated, I should say, because you never know how many exactly.
Yeah, it's hard to say. With as many competitors, you're probably looking at 2 or more, family members or somebody there to support them per contestant. There's nobody here that just, as far as I know, nobody here just running it solo without friends or family here to watch them. And to be honest with you, these people are amazing. The guys that finish these races, it's just amazing. So, yeah, they've got a large support group, and you have to have that. You have to train for this for years. You can't just jump in and do it. So there's tons of people here.
Well, on top of it, you have the local community comes out to see it, and then usually these races, and no different than this one today, is they're in a highly populated commercial district that even if this race was not happening today, it would be heavily populated just by the shops and the restaurants and everything else that's there. So that doesn't go away just because, Ironman comes in.
Correct. And also, we got lucky this year. In years past, we've had sellout crowds at the Woodlands Pavilion for Dave Matthews. And then we add on top of it is senior prom. And so there's just this whole area is just saturated with people, not to mention the movie theater, the mall, all of that stuff, all of it has to come into play. And, you just have to prepare for it and try to put people in the most strategic places for it.
Well, we've had a couple of advances in technology that, of course, has assisted us with large operations like that, such as drones, where we used to have to fly over with either helicopters or planes and such. So, drones have played a big factor, and I'm sure you can speak to other technology that has helped us along the way. Checking backpacks, checking people, and obviously canines being a large part of that.
Sure. So we monitor just about everything. We're monitoring for any type of radiation threat. All of our ATVs have sophisticated radiation detection equipment on board. All of the officers that are out here are carrying the PRDs, the personal radiation detectors, so that if, some sort of radioactive threat were to end up here, we would start getting alerts for it. I did be able to identify what that isotope is, whether it's medical treatment or, special nuclear materials, that sort of stuff. And then we have the area arrays. They're set up around this entire complex, and it samples the air. It samples the air quality. If we have a chemical release, we have anything that happens, we've got teams, the hazmat teams are sitting there watching those. So if they get an alert, we can get somebody over there to see what the source of it is.
Well, and I know that, we always think in our area, well, it couldn't happen here, right? And we've said that, I would say, one too many times, that what we don't think could happen, happens. We do our best to prepare. We do our best to keep safe. But it is hard to stop somebody that does not care about being caught and does not care about dying. And I think that y'all do an amazing job out there. I think that as we've learned from our lessons in education and law enforcement and otherwise, that the preparation that is put in is one of the biggest deterrents from someone making that a target. We talk about soft targets, hard targets, and the harder we can make it as a target, the better.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the hardest part of our job, is to be able to stop somebody that's got genuine hate in their heart. And if they're looking to hurt somebody, we're going to try to do everything we can to get out in front of it. Whether it's intelligence, we've got folks watching social media, we've got people watching everything. And, if there is some sort of threat or anything that we deem credible, we try to get out in front of it before it happens. Whether it's, sending a detective over to go talk to him, just whatever. So, as many, it's hard to say, in the world today, who's mad at who. So, you just have to take as many preparations as you can to try to get out in front of something like that.
Joe, I appreciate all y'all's hard work today out there, and I hope that it ends up being a safe day for everybody. Everybody goes home healthy and happy, and citizens and all the first responders, all the local community people involved in this. So I hope you have a great day out there, and I really appreciate you taking time to talk to us and taking a break. Hopefully you got off your feet for about 10 minutes. I know you're headed back out with the dog to go run some areas, but I really appreciate you taking time to talk to us today.
You're very welcome. Absolutely. Anytime, Dan.
I have Eddie from the Harris County Fire Marshal's office that we're talking about preparedness of events, and a unique job that Eddie Green has is he is tasked with doing security of every NFL Super Bowl that we have seen. He's a behind-the-scenes person, and some unique things that obviously we're talking about preparedness and how we prepare things, trying to stop any catastrophic events from happening. And one of those things that is put in place is having specific people for the year. So, Eddie, thank you so much for coming on the show. And how long have you been working for the NFL and Super Bowls? How many have you gone to?
Well, first of all, Dan, thank you for having me. I've been doing this since about 2002. That's when I first started.
So that's you got 22 Super Bowls under your belt?
Not quite 22. I believe there's 3 that I did not make. One because the weather was just bad, and another due to COVID. My wife decided it's best you not go.
Okay. All right. So in putting that together, obviously one of the reasons is to have the same people, but that you don't have unknowns entering into that event. So how How far ahead do y'all have to plan for Super Bowls and those type of large events like that?
Well, normally for a Super Bowl that's in February, we normally start around June.
Wow.
So from there, we get the plans for the stadium that we're going to be working at. So that way we can actually look at every stairwell, every elevator, escalator, any type of in and outs of that stadium to decide how many people we're going to put in that area, just so people can't necessarily sneak out or sneak in, as well as set up a perimeter and how far out that perimeter fence will be to man that as well.
So in putting together plans, is it different every year because of things that are happening either in the news or concerns that you have, threats that come in? Is it pretty much a standard that you just add to, or is it something like new every year that you take on?
Well, it's actually new every year, for one, because every stadium is set up differently. So every stadium might not have the same major points of coming in and coming out. That also, we also look at the weather, because although most Super Bowls are in like Miami or California, there was a couple of Super Bowls that was in Atlanta when it was really cold, Minneapolis when it was a snowstorm actually was there, New York when there was a snowstorm there. That was the first open air stadium that they ever had during the winter. So we have to look at all the contingencies as far as people. Where we're going to move them to if something happens. So we do train for any type of terrorist threats, bomb threats, and inclement weather.
So obviously this is not just you and your team. You're having to work with police, fire, all sorts of federal agencies, everybody that comes in and does this. It's with everything, it's a team effort. One of the things that's been brought up in such as the Uvalde school shooting and other terrorist attacks is that these teams never got to work together. They had similar training but never actually worked together. Do you feel that that's a hindrance, or do y'all have time to work together? Are these people that you have worked with before? How does that work?
Well, luckily with the Super Bowls, they're normally the same exact people. So other than the local police, federal-wise, it's the same folks that come in. So whether it's DEA, ATF, FBI, Secret Service, those are all the same folks. So we try to all be on one accord as far as just radio frequencies. That's a big deal because everybody's used to handling the radio differently or using their own jargon and so forth. So we have classes right before the Super Bowl and before a lot of the training on what type of jargon we're going to use, how we're going to set things in place, almost kind of like an incident command setup as far as what area takes precedence over another area.
So with having the same people, that also helps in the sense that you know who's supposed to be there and who's not, right?
That is correct.
If there's a new person on board, I'm sure they get introduced very well, that everybody knows the new person is here.
And very quickly, yes.
Yeah. So it's amazing work in putting those type of things together. And obviously these things have developed over the years as we have had incidents that have occurred. What are some things that stand out that I guess throughout the 20 years have changed from when you first did it to now that you're doing, I say, differently, or technology, or just different approaches that we have now that you didn't have 20 years ago?
Well, one simple thing is making sure that we switch out credentials and uniforms from just working right before the Super Bowl to the Super Bowl itself. Because what we found out is years ago, people like to take photos, put them on Facebook or any other type of social media, but they would be wearing their credentials. So people copied the credentials, copied the colors of the shirt and so forth. And so we've had people who would try to sneak in with their own credentials, with their pictures and so forth on it. So we switched that up a lot. We had chips embedded in a lot of the badges, and we've had scanners. So that way they now have to go through a scanner and not just come in and show their badge to come into work. A lot of times with the halftime show, we bring those people off-site to a location that nobody else knows to make sure that we vet all them, the people putting together the stage, the talent themselves, and their band. So we take care of all that off-site.
No one comes in without coming.
Nobody, exactly. Nobody comes in there. So which is a great thing because we can handle that easily and then take them back to the stadium to perform. And when they're done, take them back because that's where everybody parks at off-site.
So it sounds like, again, a major undertaking, but you don't have a lot of time either. I mean, this is fast-moving. On the day of, obviously from June to February, there's the time. There's the time of planning and whatnot. But on the day of, it's all go.
No, the day of, you probably start about 2 a.m, and you probably don't stop until 2 the next morning. Yeah. So you want to make sure that everybody gets in safely, and also everybody gets out same way.
And so that's the threat to there. But obviously, then we talk about preparedness of if it does happen. All right, we're trying to stop it from happening, but if it does, and when we talk about it, we're talking about someone with a bomb, an active shooter, any of these things. You also have all the things in place to, one, stop the threat, if possible. Obviously, you're not stopping a bomb once it goes off, but the injuries, the structure damage, getting people out, all those things are in place. All those things, the hospitals, the ambulances, everything already has to be there. If it's not there, you've increased the problem.
Mm-hmm. Well, during our planning, we actually advertised to have normally a couple 1,000 people to show up at the stadium. We put them in different places within the stadium, and we do a simulation of a bomb threat or something like that to see how quickly we can move people out, get fire in, get ambulances in, and then take them to the hospital and so forth. So we do all that. We also have a little triage outside where we can, assist with, bandaging and so forth of people. So we go through quite a bit of preparation before the actual Super Bowl happens.
So you basically do some practice runs.
Yes,
right.
That's correct.
Near like we do for, I guess, EMS disasters and just our cities and stuff, but which the Super Bowl by nature is its own city by the time they come in. What's the general attendance at one of those that y'all are dealing with?
It can be 80,000 and up, depending upon if that stadium is set up for extra seating.
That's the attendees.
Yes, that's just the attendees.
So then you have the teams.
Yep, they have the teams, and then a lot of times there are people outside the stadium they're into the gate, but they're in the pavilion and
tailgating type.
Exactly.
Thing,
so
right?
We have all that as well.
Well, it's amazing to hear because people don't think about all the work that goes in to keep them safe, to make sure that if something happens, they survive, that we take the people into custody if there is a responsible party, and how many people have to work together to pull that off. And, that's one of the things that we've been covering for this semester that I've been at Louisiana State University, Shreveport, and the doctorate program for leadership studies. And we're talking about critical incidents this semester. And I think this is a great knowledge in dealing with preparation, because along the whole lesson, along the whole semester, we've talked about preparation, training, and how much work goes into that. And if you have not prepared, there's a whole different end result, right?
Yeah. Well, luckily, Homeland Security has a lot of free classes that we take that deals with whether it's schools, whether it's sporting events and so forth, that we have to take that helps out with all this. So we bring that as well as incident command. We bring all that in, and we look at how many people do we need. So I know we normally, for unarmed security, we normally have anywhere from 3,500 to 4,000 people.
Wow.
Just for that. Law enforcement wise, it could be another 2,000 for that. And that's just within the stadium. So that's not talking about outside the stadium or traffic or parking lot or so forth. So
nearly 6,000 people that are in that stadium, which also could become victims, also need to be rescued, are the first responders.
Correct.
Which is, when you think about that, you have 100,000 people and you have 6,000 that are there to take care of 100,000. Now, you think of a city that's 100,000 population. If we walked in and said, hey, we would like 6,000 police officers for patrol.
Exactly.
Never going to happen, right?
Exactly.
But luckily, when we're dealing with these events, we have a lot of great support. And I appreciate you sharing your knowledge, sharing your experience, Eddie. Thank you so much for swinging by and talking to us. And again, I just appreciate you so much as a friend and knowledge and hanging out. And certainly you've done so much in your career, and this is just one of the many things that you take on and do it very well. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Today with us, I have Mike Gentry, who has been a police chief in Harker Heights. He has served on many committees for the Texas Police Chief Association. I can go on and on as far as his resume, but we'll post some of his bio on the website for you. Just an amazing person. I've gotten to learn from him and be in some of his classes, and just an amazing individual. Mike, thanks so much for taking time to talk to us today.
Yes, sir, Dan. Thank you for those kind words.
So, Mike, one thing that we're sort of exploring is critical incidents and preparing for them and the importance of preparing for them. And a sad situation here in Texas that made worldwide news was the elementary school shooting in Uvalde. And I know that in some of the classes we've talked about some of the leadership failures, certainly us preparing for hopefully doing something that in the future that those delays and those problems don't happen. And so I just wanted to have you on this morning to talk about that, your insight from years of service and doing this. And guess on a side note, how long you been a police officer now?
46 years.
That is incredible. So Mike, give me some insight on Uvalde. I know that this is close to home too. I mean, you're in Texas. I mean, this hit deep for many people, but certainly here in Texas.
Yeah, it was obviously heartbreaking for anybody that observed any aspect of it, whether they were insiders in law enforcement or not. And one of the, I think, primary concerns in regard to this is the sort of pathological need to diagnose what went wrong. And the fact is, at least in my view, is we work to try to determine where there are shortfalls in situations like this. But the most obvious shortfall is right in front of our face, and that is just will and determination to take a risk and do what's right in the face of adversity. And that's a leadership cue. And I think that there's been a lot of mischaracterizations about individuals involved in the Uvalde incident, at least from my perspective, and I'll caveat everything I say by saying my opinion is more valuable than anybody else's. But I think that the concept or the accusation that may have been made in some circles, that there was a group of cowardly law enforcement officers who came together in kind of a cohesive failure there, is not really accurate. I think it boils down to the fact that law enforcement officers, and really all human beings, are sort of trained and conditioned to react to any situation and take a read of the environment and then make a decision on what to do. And almost all of those arriving officers to that incident were taking a read off of that environment, and that environment was preset by virtue of some early leadership failures to essentially paralyze people, because if you can imagine a group of a line of marbles in a tube, the first marble can see out of the tube, but the ones stacked behind him cannot. And that's kind of what happened here, is that we had an individual or two who responded, misread the event, and everybody who arrived in support of that only had very limited information and the leadership directive to hold instead of push. And so those people weren't cowardly. They were trying to be in a support role, but they didn't have an understanding of the fact that a wrong decision had been made early that poisoned every responding chain of thought thereafter, until finally there was enough information shared that
it knocked some people out of paralysis, and then they went and way too late, in my judgment, handled the event. Now, I'm not making any apology for anything that happened there. I'm just making the point that if you arrive on a scene and the person who is apparently in control of that scene tells you we have something that we don't have and tells you to do something that is in reality inappropriate, your preset is to follow that lead because that person's in charge and they're trained as well. And
sure.
That's
I think one of the I guess conflicts in this. I mean, we go back to Columbine, where no one went in, and
exactly.
Then now we're going in, but we're looking at the leader, whoever's in charge. What do you know? What do you have?
That's right.
And in this particular situation, you had an active shooter, but there was a conversation like you had a barricaded subject.
Well, and
both those are handled very differently.
That's right, and that is the disconnect in the assessment that I referred to earlier in general terms. Everybody arrives, they're told it's a barricade when in reality it's an active shooter, but they don't have enough independent information to trigger an independent response. And that is leadership. It is not that those men and women did not know how to handle an active shooter. It was a leadership mislead that caused them not to activate that capability. And that is purely a leadership failure. And that's my point, is that operations and operational success depends on good leadership decisions. And when leadership fails, the ripples go all the way into the operational paradigms. And that's why we have to obviously be integral in an organization. We have to follow and support leadership, but we also have to be empowered enough to recognize when some critical mistake is being made and then overcome it. This is analogous in some ways. I know nobody's ever made this parallel, or nobody likes to make this parallel if they've ever thought of it, but it's similar to what we saw with George Floyd, in that we had one officer that was kind of lost, apparently either had abandoned or lost a good assessment of what he was doing. And we had other officers who were saying, you need to stop that. And but yet they did not have the gravity in the event to change that behavior. And that tells you that critical incidents, there's a lot of assumptions afoot, and there's a lot of trained response. And those trained responses can fall victim to bad leadership, just like they can succeed under good leadership. And we've got to, as law enforcement officers, always maintain an ethical independence to back away and keep a broad view of the environment around us and say, wait a minute, this is not right. We have to not do this way. We have to change. We have to think differently. And that may even be one officer stopping another and saying, don't do that. It may be somebody looking at a chief of police and saying, get out of the way. We've got something that has to be done here. And that ethical independence is not something that is universally discussed, in my opinion, to the degree that it should be.
And I think we've discussed it all the way back to Rodney King, right? That at some point you had a supervisor that you had to go against, which goes against, everything we're trained up to that point, right? But I say everything we're trained. You're trained from the academy. If they're doing something illegal, you stop it.
Yeah,
but it still goes against.
But the problem is many times we work around one another so much that we wouldn't ever think that somebody would do something like that, and we have a bit of an overinvestment at times in the individual, that we don't watch the individual action, and that's not a horrible thing when people deserve your trust,
right?
But when they don't, then you've got to maintain, and that's a phrase I've adopted over the years, is ethical independence. I've got to be able to look at this environment and disengage from the groupthink when I see something that requires an ethical determination to change. And what happened in Uvalde, Dan, in my opinion, was that the chief there of the ISD police department
Yes,
did not do a great job preparing his people for the eventuality of such event. Maybe that's not an uncommon problem, but when it actually happened, I think his desire to look in charge may have clouded his ability to be in charge. He was controlling it, but controlling it wrong, and the people around him didn't have the stock in trade to override him until things were so obviously sideways that somebody way outside the inner circle made the decision to bring the thing to a close.
Well, I think one of the failures I think one of the failures we see with, and not just specific to ISD, but in small towns, small areas, there's this, it's not going to happen here, right? And you nearly get...
But that's probably what Santa Fe thought, right?
Right.
It's what the church in Sutherland Springs thought. It happens in places like this.
And again, you go to prepare. There's money involved in training. There's money involved in sending people, because obviously that training usually doesn't exist at those rural areas. And so then you have the thought of, well, it's not going to happen here. We don't need to invest in that. And I can't tell you how many people said, by God, that won't happen in Texas. And now we've had more than one, right?
And it's because of the pressures of the immediate moment trigger a decision loop that looks analogous to paralysis from the outside. And the issue for me, Dan, is we can, as I said, we can diagnose what happened, but here's the impact, at least in my opinion, is that leadership is not a science. Leadership is more of an art. It's a people issue. It has to do with people, and it has to do less with the mind and more with the heart. And what I mean by that is, you can know what to do, right? You've been taught it. You can have the ability to do what needs to be done. You have all the resources. But until it is ingrained in your heart, where you are impassioned about doing what is right, then it won't get done. You can know what to do. You've got the knowledge. You've got the ability. You can do a difficult task when the need arises. But unless your heart drives you to do it, it won't get done. And that's leadership. Leadership is inspiration. Leadership is based on trust. And leadership is courage. And if you don't have those things, even in the encapsulated period of 1 minute, if you don't have those things, then a leadership failure can occur. Because you've got to have courage, you've got to have determination, you've got to have will, you've got to have trust, you've got to have a passion for leading people to do what is right in a very difficult circumstance. And there's another issue that's closely akin to that, as I know you and I have discussed before, and that is you have to be willing to serve others and sacrifice for them. If you're not willing to do that, that's a heart decision. That's not a cognitive decision. It's a passionate decision. And if you're not willing to sacrifice and to serve somebody else, put yourself on the line for the good of somebody else, then you're going to be less likely to trigger that courageous act that will inspire others to follow, to do a very difficult task in a very difficult time. It is the essence of leadership to be able to not only cause others around you to be inspired, but to inspire and awaken in yourself the need to step into that gap for the benefit of somebody else. And if you're not, that's where the weakness is. It's not that nobody knew what needed to be done or that they were somehow impeded from operationally from doing what needed to be done. It's that their hearts weren't triggered, and nobody decided, you know what, this is what we promised we would do. We said that if somebody started killing our neighbors' children, that we would sacrifice ourselves to stop it. And this is the moment of truth. This is what we all said we would do if we had to. We have to now get out of the way.
No, Mike, that's and obviously ending on that note, you defined and talked about leadership in many areas, and I think that is a true, underscore of the definition and then what we try to teach in our classes, and then certainly all those out there, the idea that we can prevent another school shooting, another mass casualty, another incident. It is hard to stop someone who does not care about getting caught, does not care about dying themselves. But it starts with leadership. It starts with preparing. And again, you hit on so many different areas. And again, I just love listening to you talk about leadership and your lessons that we've learned along the way. And certainly in the future, I'd love to have you back. We'll talk more about that. But I know that you have a busy schedule and you have many things to do. So I appreciate you coming on today.
Well, you bet. And thanks for asking, Dan. And I'm glad to always visit with you. You're one of the ones that I have so much confidence in. I know where your heart is, and whatever little effect we can have on our partners, and to be a support for them and to help them understand and be reminded of the significantly moral and ethical underpinnings of this job, then I'm happy to do it. And I think that I'll just say one other thing. You said these people are hard to stop. There's only one way to stop them, and that's go right at them. And, all bullies are cowards when confronted. And it's our job, our moral, ethical, noble job to go at a bully. And I've always been proud to be positioned to do it. And I think that's what we need to be talking about, is not so much the technical training about how to react to somebody like this, but remind one another of the unbelievable responsibility to be courageous and follow through with that training. And I know law enforcement officers, so many of them, thousands of them, they have the heart to do it. But you have to have leadership that will plow the way for them to do that. And that's what
we've been listening to Crime Scene Today. We are part of the IR Lone Star Community Radio family and featured on all major podcasts, currently listened to in 29 countries around the world. If you have a topic you would like covered, if you would like to be a guest on the show, or if you'd like to become a sponsor of the show, please contact me, Dan@crimescenetoday.com. We appreciate your continued support. We'll see you next week.